For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi. Our guest today is Cleo Paskal. Cleo, good to see you in person after a while. We've done a lot of online chats and hear each other's dogs in the background.
It is great to see you in person and to be back in India. It's been since the pandemic, and I encourage everybody come back to India. It's time to come back. It's good to be here.
I believe you had quite some experiences, which maybe we'll talk off camera about. But just looking at developments here in India, we had the Australian Prime Minister Albanese here. He visited the indigenous aircraft carrier. We had Prime Minister Kishida. He talked about the Indo-Pacific, how India is an indispensable partner. India and the US have made strides over the last few decades, military technology, Quad, 2+2. How do you see this whole formation, which is clearly aimed at an aggressively intended China?
There's no Indo-Pacific without India, obviously. I mean, it's a truism, but it's more than just geography. It's an idea. You know, India represents democracy, pluralistic society, hope. It's something that's incredibly important for many other countries in the region and beyond, to say, look, there is a model that isn't the Western model, that isn't the Chinese model, that is something that is kind of more organic and of the region. And so I think that, you know, there are different ways of looking at India. One might be that big power type stuff that you're talking about. But the equally important is what India means to other countries that, you know, Philippines, Pacific Islands, you know, Indonesia, all these other potential strong partners and bulwarks across the region. So it's not just against China. It's more about sovereignty, about how countries can keep their sovereignty in the context of evolving and very contentious geopolitics.
Like you said, India is an Indian Ocean power, not just a maritime one. You mentioned the Philippines, there's Indonesia, closer home, Sri Lanka, the Maldives. We're working on Mauritius, Seychelles as well. The Pacific Islands, as you mentioned. So how important, if you want to elaborate on the alternative that India possibly gives to, as you said, versus the West and China in the Pacific Island countries?
Yeah, so Pacific Island countries are really squeezed. If you take a look, first of all, the Pacific Islands is hard as a concept because you have countries like Tuvalu, which has 10,000 people, a very small atoll type country, and you have Papua New Guinea, where Prime Minister Modi will be visiting, which has a larger landmass and a larger population than New Zealand, right? So and it has an enormous number of resources. It's very strategically located. So that's one of the issues that I think we've had, is having one Pacific Island policy that you think will suit everything, and then saying things like, oh, you know, and this happens in the US will work with Australia and New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. That's fine, but they actually have very little footprint in the Central Pacific, where it's more Japan and the Philippines that might have, and Taiwan that might have a presence. So the first thing is sort of to disaggregate and look at them on their own terms, and then you can figure out how India fits in. So if you're looking at a place that is like, for example, the Solomon Islands, the healthcare, the education opportunities, the potential transportation links, all that sort of stuff would create the economic substrata that can support a healthy society. That makes it much more difficult both for the Chinese corrosive influence, or what's been happening on the Australian side, for example, to distort the regional politics, which is why the High Commissioner of India to the Solomon Islands, I think, was blocked from entry to Solomons for many months, particularly because the Chinese proxy in power, the Prime Minister Sogavare, saw him as a threat. But I think also other players actually don't particularly want to see India play a bigger role because they think in a zero-sum game term that it might affect their own position in the region.
Recently, External Affairs Minister was in Fiji, and we had an online chat during that. As you mentioned, the Prime Minister is reportedly going to Papua New Guinea as well. Do you think India has shown the intent, the capability, the capacity? Do we have the financial muscle? Do we have the will to actually engage there? Is there a reason?
So when Prime Minister Modi first went to the region in 2014, the things that he announced there, like visas on arrival for Pacific Islanders, indicated an understanding of the concerns and the ground reality of Pacific Islanders that was extremely promising. India has a lot of challenges, right? It has Pakistan, it has China, it has Sri Lanka, it has, and it's not China where the MEA is used in the case of China, their foreign affairs is used as like a bulldozer to get in their strategic interests. It's a democracy. So the MEA has had a lot to handle. And one of the things that wasn't prioritized for a while was the Pacific Islands, and now it's being picked back up. So in terms of the things that you listed, I'd say that an understanding of the region is actually, as indicated by what Prime Minister did in 2014, is actually very high. I'd say it's been medium priority, but now clearly it is if the Prime Minister is going there and is having a meeting with other Pacific Island leaders in the region. It's a show that he's not just saying, like President Biden did, come to Washington and we'll have a big event. He's making the effort to go there. So that's a demonstration of political will. In terms of funding, they actually don't want aid. They want trade and co-development, and they're paying for things already. They're paying to go to university in Australia, or they're paying for expensive Western medicine, or they're paying for Huawei towers, or they're paying. All of those things could be, I think, more economically provided by India, and they would be more secure and help the human security development side of the countries. So what that requires is things like direct flights so that Indian businesses can get into the region and people from the region can come and study and work and learn from India. So just some of that facilitation for the back and forth, and I think it would grow on its own.
And again, you've been keeping a close eye on developments there. What's the latest in terms of, as you said, the corrosive or coercive part of China in the region?
The most remarkable thing to happen was a letter that was written by the president of Micronesia, David Panuelo, on the 9th of March. It's a 13-page letter. And in it, he details that really aggressive hybrid warfare, he calls it political warfare and gray zone activity that China has perpetrated on his country. And it includes funding separatist movements, buying off parts of his administration to force in the Sinovac vaccine. He talks about being personally threatened by Chinese officials. In one incredible case, he describes how there was an event that he didn't send an official from his government to. China selected a private citizen, a Micronesian private citizen, to represent his country. So completely bypassing normal diplomatic procedures. It's sort of an incredible attempt to take over the entire mechanisms of government of a sovereign nation. And as a result, what he says is, we would like to consider de-recognizing China and recognizing Taiwan as a bulwark for protecting the sovereignty of his nation. So he put that offer on the table, and he put down what would be required, because the Chinese will pull out all of their budgetary support. And for his economy not to collapse, he requires, the amounts by global standards are pretty small, like 40 million a year or something like that, for 3 years while they readjust. So it is an exceptional statement from a very brave leader who undoubtedly is on the Chinese hit list now, definitely politically, if not personally, standing up for his country and saying, you have this sort of engagement with China, they will destroy your country and try to take it over. I'm trying to escape. He's requesting liberation. It's like a World War II situation. World War II is kinetic warfare. This is political warfare. Here's the leader of a country requesting, begging to be liberated from a Chinese takeover. Now we'll see what happens.
You mentioned President Biden, and he had a meeting there with the Pacific Island leaders. But I think Jake Sullivan was there. Maybe Blinken had also gone there. The Japanese foreign minister was there. Australia as part of the region. And all of them looking at China as a threat in the larger picture as well. Are they not doing anything to stop the Chinese inroads?
So there are very good people within each of those systems who, any country, no country is monolithic. So in any country, you've got people who want to fight the good fight and who truly believe in things like democracy and transparency and human rights. And there are others who seem to have different approaches. So the Australians, for example, I've talked to them at length about why they continuously support the Solomon Islands Prime Minister, Revi, who is clearly pro-China. And they'll say, well, we only deal with the government in power. Well, if the government in power has postponed elections, which is what he has done, and they haven't objected, then they're essentially supporting a dictatorship and they're demoralizing the democratic opposition. So I don't quite understand why they do that. India doesn't do that. The U.S. doesn't do that. When they go to the Solomons, they meet the opposition. They meet everybody. They're a democracy. You meet civil society, the women's groups, the journalists, the opposition. Australia doesn't. So I don't quite know what they're doing. I mean, they are trying to get a trade deal with China. And China is very good at getting into people's heads and making them think, oh, we can't do anything to upset Beijing, as if every issue is interrelated and as if China is the most sensitive country on the planet, whereas countries don't seem to mind upsetting India, wait however long for a visa, but then expect India to do other stuff for it. So I think that needs to be reevaluated, but also Australia is relevant in the southern part of the Pacific, but in a case like Micronesia, they're not a factor. The central and northern Pacific, that's more Japan, more Taiwan, and obviously the U.S. So this is where I'm really keen to see what Prime Minister Modi comes up with, and the team comes up with, because I think there's a more hopefully sophisticated, nuanced, and diversified approach to countries in the region.
And why should anybody be concerned about what's happening in that region? I know we've talked about it a lot in our online chats.
So look at a map, and the PLA Navy is clearly the key focus of the military might of China. They're launching about 5 ships to every 1 ship the U.S. is launching, aircraft carriers, the subs. They're clearly focused on the Navy. They need to break out of that first island chain that goes Japan, Taiwan, all the way down. What they're doing while they're focusing on Taiwan is leapfrogging to the Pacific Islands so they can squeeze it from both sides. And in the process, if they can get that middle part of the Pacific, they can push the U.S. back to Hawaii. This is Japan's World War II map of the region. And many of the places that we're talking about, Solomon Islands, it was the site of the Battle of Guadalcanal in World War II. It was a horrific battle. Many people died. China has captured Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal without firing a shot. Currently, at this very moment, the government of Solomon Islands does not allow U.S. ships, naval ships, to land at Solomon Islands, or Indian ships for that matter. They captured it. And just through very targeted political warfare, buying off the right people. And you didn't ask, but I'm going to say it anyway. The way that this can be countered is when the Chinese go in, they use the commercial entry point. They've got a strategic element to it, obviously, so they go in commercially, but then they buy the ports and whatever. But the third element is always corruption. And that's the weak point. So they buy off Revi and his family, the Prime Minister of Solomons, and that money is laundered through Australia, Australian real estate, Australian bank accounts, and New Zealand too, some other places. All you have to do is go after the illegal money, and that braid starts to weaken and fall apart. So all you have to do is do what you're supposed to do anyway, right? Which is go after things that are illegal, and you give a breathing room to the democratic process within the country. You create a level playing field if the corrupt money starts to disappear. If you don't, you're asking about why is it important? You get a situation where you start to get, if the South China Sea is taken and those Pacific Islands are taken, everything east of Malacca starts to fall into the Chinese orbit, and the U.S. is pushed back to Hawaii. They've won the Pacific theater, right? And that isn't the end, obviously, as you know, because they're positioning in Sri Lanka. They tried to position Maldives, tried to position Seychelles, and Djibouti, and coming across there. So you start to get squeezed in a maritime perspective from all sides.
You were talking about how you like to see how India would take this forward, and the Prime Minister, what he visits there. I was just looking at some reports over the last few years, and I went back maybe to 2013 and possibly even before that. A lot of analysts who were talking about how India needs to up its engagement, even in 2013, maybe it wasn't so pronounced, the Chinese involvement then, but it was seen as critical. Do you see that changing?
Well, more people are... Yeah, no, I mean, the visit from Prime Minister Modi is the first to Papua New Guinea of any Indian prime minister. So it's... And for that kind of a visit, that means all of the mechanisms of government get involved. And suddenly, MEA has to produce a bunch of experts on the Pacific Islands, right? So it forces a level of awareness, understanding, engagement, and policy making just by declaring a visit like that. And once people learn about the region, they'll start to realize this is pretty important. And the cost of engagement increases over time. So if India had engaged more in 2014, it would be done by now. The desire on the side of many in the Pacific Islands for more engagement with India is very high. The cost is now going to be a little higher, but it's still really possible. And part of it is because the Chinese don't understand India, right? I mean, they understand that it's an existential threat to China because the Chinese Communist Party says one of their justifications for existing is you can only run a country of 1 billion plus people if you're authoritarian. Right next door.
It's a bit of chaos, as you witnessed, but
it's fine. I mean, we are sitting here talking about whatever we want to talk about. Nobody in China can do this. I mean, it's a prison. And similarly, China says, people of faith are a threat. Because they're a threat to the Chinese Communist Party. If you believe in something other than Chinese Communist Party for your salvation, then you're right next door in India. Yeah. So they know that India is a threat, but they don't take it seriously strategically. If you read things like Unrestricted Warfare, books like that, written by PLA colonels, they'll quote Machiavelli and Clausewitz and zero Indian strategists. It's a big advantage for India. It means they don't know how smart you are, which is why when they murder 20 Indian soldiers and India retaliates by banning 59 apps, they're taken by surprise. They didn't, it was a very smart move. So similarly in the Pacific Islands, I think India once India decides this is an area to focus on, it can move very quickly and effectively.
Cleo Paskal, as always, it's a great pleasure to pick your brains, and this time in person. We hope you visit much often, and we'll come over and see you and maybe do another one in there.
That would be great. Both of those options are great, and it's really good to see you in person.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you like this interview, do hit the thumbs up button on YouTube. Do follow all our social media handles. If you see the Telegram scroll at the bottom of your screen, follow that. You'll get updates as soon as we put up articles on our website or interviews like this with Cleo Paskal on our YouTube channel. This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.
The future of space industry is here. From satellites to space launch vehicles, from landers to rovers, there's a lot happening in the space industry globally. And we at Interstellar are here to bring news and insights from all these opportunities and developments happening in the global space sector.
Interstellar.news is a digital platform exclusively focusing on developments in the space industry of India in particular and the world over in general. We will bring you timely, accurate, informative and engaging content as we go along in this journey together.
As India's first digital news platform for the space sector, we are committed to bring to you latest insights and in-depth analysis on the various developments happening in the space sector.
We have a team of experienced professionals drawn from the academia as well as the media to bring you exclusive content which will cover all aspects of the space industry in India, from policy to innovation to new inventions and to commerce, which forms the greater part of the space industry the world over, and of course it's beginning to play an important part in the Indian ecosystem. That's what our journey is going to be, and I'm excited to invite you to join this journey to the outer space rooted in the earth.
So whether you are a professional, a student or an enthusiast, www.interstellar.news is your go-to platform for all news regarding the space sector.